25 minutes where nobody is mean about the power of Kroll. Could there be such a thing? There could be, in happy times and places. Presented by me, Toby Hadoke, trying to accentuate the positive about every single episode of Doctor Who I watch, aided by a friend who's chosen their favourite thing about it, and I have to guess what that is.
Hello, my name is Ian Winterton. I'm a playwright and writer and journalist, and I am picking The Power of Kroll from 1978.
Well, welcome back, everybody, because I am your Ranquin, and you are my squid. Because there was another song called The Power of Kroll, not Kroll, Love, at around that time. There should be like Equity, shouldn't it, where you can't have two songs called The Power of Love out at around about the same time. I remember at the time thinking that Jennifer Rush and Huey Lewis could have had a conflab, and not both released a song with the same title. Hated the Jennifer Rush one at the time. I'm rather fond of it now, but was furious that somebody who sounded like an opera singer was number one for 5 weeks. Why have I remembered that? Because I've been doing Power of Love / Power of Kroll wordplay in the previous 2 episodes. And why not carry on where I left off? I've had a break since episodes 1 and 2. And if anything, my week has got worse. How much professional rejection in 1 week is too much? Well, I'm currently putting that to the test. But look, you have come here to escape from whatever life is throwing at you, and I don't think it's fair to inflict what it's throwing at me upon you. You can get enough of having things thrown at you, and you are here presumably to hear somebody wanging on about Doctor Who, and I am going to wang on about episode 3 of The Power of Kroll, which I have to say, on a pretty turdy day the other day, gave me 50 minutes of plenty to think about and enjoy. And I hope that episode 3 is going to do the same, and it's not all going to fall to pieces. So I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1, and I'm selecting on BritBox, which means the circly thing will go around for 3. Here we go. So we are on episode 3 of The Power of Kroll. Alexa, volume 5. So we'll just get the volume down a little bit. Alexa, volume 4, I think even. Is she actually doing as I tell her? Is she listening to me at all? Alexa, volume 4. Even Alexa is rejecting me. Is this attached to Alexa? I think it is, yeah. Anyway, we'll cope. We'll cope. Alexa, volume 4. There, see, the music was too loud. Who'd have thought that the best that modern technology has to throw, particularly something that is all about volume, doesn't work when the volume is too high. And the only person that can turn down the volume is the thing that doesn't work. Anyway, let's not get into that. But it's worth saying, though, isn't it? Because I've been sort of whinging a bit in my head this week. But, looking at everybody who made The Power of Kroll in 77, 78, whenever it was, they didn't have... you couldn't just nip to the shops and get an avocado, could you? Trains anywhere probably took 4 or 5 days. I think certain places you could only get there by horse. There was no pesto. I mean, come on. So it's all relative. So before I decide that I'm getting too old, so old I'm going to sleep at the bottom of the swamp for 200 years and just fart, I have to grab life by the tentacles. In this case, watch the recap of The Power of Kroll, where Kroll has woken up, which is good news, because you don't really want to send soporific signals to the audience, and I do take note of the fact that there is a lot of John Leeson and Philip Maddox sitting around going, nothing's actually happening, which is not the best signal to send to an audience. I do like Haag being dragged down the pipe. I like all of this business. Now, I was thinking about Neil McCarthy. I think the Philip Maddox thing, I poo-pooed the idea a little bit. I mean, I think it's true that he thought he was playing Thorn, or had been offered Thorn, at which point this became clear. Sort of varies, but the original story as told was that he turned up on location expecting to be playing Thorn and said, "Oh, hello, Neil McCarthy. Well, are you playing Fenner then?" And Neil McCarthy went, "No, I'm playing Thorn." He went, really? I thought I was playing Thorn, and was perturbed to realise he was playing the second in command, and immediately thought, well, I better make him grumpy. Which is that, and that was one of those things that I think was even in a sort of fact file in an early Doctor Who weekly. So you sort of expect it to actually turn out to be not true, as a lot of things did that were sort of stories that stuck from those early days. But there seems to have been an element of truth in it. Although whether it was, but it certainly the timeline wasn't quite right in that Alan Browning was originally Fenner, so Maddock was called in quite late in the day, and maybe that's where there was a miscommunication. But Neil McCarthy definitely wasn't the only person offered Thorn either. He wanted Julian Glover, he wanted George Baker, so his casting ambition, Norman Stewart, was very sound. I love that line about the seventh of the holy rituals, and the way that Carl Rigg delivers that line about that one's not so bad. They just stick you down a hole and throw rocks at you. I think it is a brilliant line, and he plays it very, very well. I think he's not talked about often enough. Carl Rigg. I'm putting the subtitles on, so there might be a slight pause. Yes, so there might be a little bit of jiggery pokery there. If you're watching along, press pause for about 10 seconds. I am currently watching Tom Baker, Mary Tam, and Glyn Owen tied up by vines. How long does this take, says Romana. To die depends upon the sun. And Rom Dutt talks to Scart, who's played by Frank Jarvis, and also the only Doctor Who character named after a popular 1990s VHS video cable connector opera. Don't write in and say what other uses a Scart cable had. That's all I know them for doing. There will be younger people listening to this saying, what is a cable? What are wires? Everything we have is connected by the internet, which is why it always breaks and doesn't work properly and annoys me. But let's not get into the rigors of modern technology. Again, we're watching television from a time when, oh God, they didn't even have answer machines. I mean, they're primitives, not just the Swampies, but everybody in this compared to us. And yet, were they any less happy? I doubt it. Anyway, this is where Robert Holmes's flourishing of his sort of cynical disdain for religion, or at least those who abuse the power that religion gives them, I think is at its sharpest. Ranquin, for all, and he's brilliantly cast, because they've cast an actor who can do this sort of stuff and make it work. As he, this is essentially what he does in Robin of Sherwood, except in Robin of Sherwood, it's not a joke. And I have a special relationship with John Abernethy. If you haven't witnessed my one-man show, Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf, John Abernethy was an actor I just sort of started noticing things, and I knew he'd been in Doctor Who because I knew he was Carrington in Ambassadors of Death, and that was featured in an early Doctor Who magazine that I had. But then I noticed him in Robin of Sherwood, and it's a name that sort of sticks out, and he kept coming back because I sort of assumed that Herne the Hunter would only sort of be in the first episode, but he was always around in Robin of Sherwood. He actually does this stuff very well. This sort of quite quiet and dour and dry scene, but he has the gravitas to do it. He's a really good actor that was really valuable in the 70s, because he can do the kind of stuff that I'm not sure a lot of actors could manage to pull off today. It's that sort of mixture between sort of declamatory, stagey stuff, but making it sort of seem real and not hokey. Although he then says lines like, "Your mind is bent, Dryfoot, absolutely, totally straight," and is sort of funny. Oh, and the Doctor's got a line about you can't hypnotise people with narrow eyes. So the whole thing, to get a bit of exposition out, was the Doctor trying to hypnotise him, which is a witty way of getting some of the necessary dialogue out. Oh, the Doctor wasn't doing it, so we all sit down and explain the plot to each other. He had an ulterior motive. I like that. I think that's nice. So Abernethy kept cropping up on things, and then I remember getting very excited by a character called Van Lutyens in Fury from the Deep, because I read about him in the Doctor Who magazine review of Fury from the Deep, where it sort of gave away his fate, which I was slightly annoyed by, but I was just excited that it was a character with a foreign name. That seemed to be really grown up, and the idea that an important character would be somebody from overseas, and that would fit, that's multicultural crew and all that sort of multiracial crew and all that sort of thing. That quite excited me, and I sort of thought, well, who would they have got to play it? Would they have got a genuine Dutchman? And then I finally got hold of a Doctor Who program guide, and lo and behold, it was John Abernethy, which then made sense, because I went, well, no, I don't think he's got a foreign sounding name, but he's so he's probably got a foot in both camps, and that's very exciting. As it is, I think he just has some sort of accent, but he was multilingual, John Abernethy. He could speak Russian. So anyway, he was just somebody that kept popping up, and then I took a fancy to a girl at university, and we were chatting away as a group, actually, and Doctor Who popped up, and she said, "Oh, my uncle's been in Doctor Who," and I said, "What's he called?" She said, "Oh no, you never have heard of him. He wasn't a regular. He's called John Abernethy." And I went, "He's my favourite actor. I love him. He's blah, 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 blah." And eventually we had a little liaison, Rosie and I. But I don't know, timing and taste on her part scuppered anything long term. But I'm very fond of her, and she actually got me a signed picture of him. I'd written to him by that point anyway, and had an interview with him in Doctor Who magazine. Or actually, I think that I'd written to him prior to that, but the interview was published later. So anyway, I looked him up in Spotlight, and he'd won an Emmy nominated for Last of the Mohicans. That's pretty good. Not many Doctor Who actors have an Emmy nomination. And then he pops up as the butler in the Ferrero Rocher commercial. He's even got a couple of lines in The Godfather 3. So yeah, big fan of John Abernethy. So then I was quite surprised to see him play a part that hadn't really excited me much in the book. The Swampies didn't excite me much in the book anyway. They're difficult sorts of characters to pull off. So I think the fact that they even vaguely work is sort of down to the commitment of the actors, really, and some of the jokes in the script that didn't really communicate themselves to me in the book, certainly. But funny enough, when I first watched this, I was much more interested in these sorts of scenes than I was in the swampy ones. And actually, I think, he's sort of squinting as we say, "Oh, what's going on here?" I really, because John Leeson, of course, is he's not Martin Jarvis, who suddenly became unavailable, but he's also free because he's under contract for the whole of the season, and K9 cannot be in the Power of Kroll. So you've suddenly got an actor who's being paid for, so you go, yay, hoik him in. And as I say, I adore John Leeson for many reasons, and if I needed a slightly charmingly pedantic vicar to put his foot in it in a murder mystery, or even a sort of jester type character to provide a bit of sort of levity and distraction, I would go for John Leeson. Somebody staring at a scanner screen, emphasising how terrifying everything is getting. I am not sure I would tick those boxes in John Leeson's Spotlight book. But Neil McCarthy as Thorn, I was thinking about him before I started this book, because I'm not a massive fan of what he does here. He doesn't do anything wrong particularly. He just doesn't quite work. But of course, he'd been in Who Pays the Ferryman around this time, in which he's excellent. It's a sort of drama set on Crete, and with Jack Hedley, and it's really good. But the sort of local Greek head of police is played by Neil McCarthy, and his accent is so good that it convinced a lot of people he actually was, he was local, he was a native, and it's a really good performance. So he was known at this time. This rain is good, and credit to the actors standing about in the rain. Well done, Carl Rigg, who has to wait till the end. So I like the inhospitable locale. That's a nice shot of McCarthy sort of looking out of the window. It's pretend rain there, but that's okay. It's okay. A really big daddy. They call it Big Daddy, don't they? It doesn't. I think Philip Maddock calls it Jemima, doesn't he? He calls something Jemima. But there's nice little thunder effect. But the story has kind of ground to a halt a little bit here, hasn't it? Because we've seen Kroll, but the Doctor and co have been tied up for quite a long time. It could blow us all apart, and that would be massively inconvenient. And we'd have to probably call out somebody to change our tyres. And the Doctor's going to do something that might defy the audience. I mean, look at Tom Baker. He looks absolutely magnificent. He can he can pull off this sort of thing. He's going to shatter the glass, isn't he? With his, I mean, how do we feel about that, everybody? He's never done it before. Doctor Who has never done it before or since. But it shows a certain amount of ingenuity, because it's not just that the glass has been shattered. The glass has been shattered in order to wet the vines and the wood and make everything contract to blood. So it's not just the one party piece. It has a sort of knock-on effect that works particularly to the jeopardy that they find themselves in. But it's not like you could have seen that coming. It's not like they've planted it earlier. So I'm not. I'm not sure how I feel about. I'm also less sure how I feel about Tom Baker's. What are they? They galoshes. Is that the top of his boots or the bottom of his trousers? It's a funny old setup there. Come on then, off they go. So yeah, there's odd. I was very much enjoying this yesterday. I've given I think 2 or 3 actor biographies. Oh, now this is a bit more of Romana, because I watched the Rebus Operation the other day for an excellent podcast called A Wheezing Groaning Sound, and it struck me how much in Romana's first appearance she does all this sort of psychoanalyzing of the Doctor and putting him down with intelligence and long words, and that was obviously a sort of character trait that they'd decided she should have, and that she did it a little bit there about saying this is displacement anxiety. Yes, and I'm sorry. The reason I paused was because the suggestion of Stephen Shapansky from Radio Free Scarrow. I've started putting the subtitles on the episodes because I sometimes have to stop and go, I missed that line of dialogue. Whereas if I have subtitles on, and actually I find myself increasingly watching stuff with subtitles these days anyway. I remember I was in Edinburgh when doing a show in Edinburgh when doing a weekend at the Stand when The Doctor's Wife was on, and I watched it and enjoyed it, and then I came back and watched it with my stepson, who I then lived with, who is deaf, and he hadn't seen it, so we watched it together, and of course we watched it with subtitles. I understood it much better because I could hear some of the dialogue over the music. But that's the mix. The stuff is mixed really oddly these days. I can never see. As technology gets better and better, I don't think it. I mean, when this was on, we had I'm sure a portable black and white television that you had to twist a dial to get from channel to channel on. Again, we're looking at this stuff, and it doesn't look especially old-fashioned to me in the way that it probably would to, say, my kids if they watched them. The mix of film to VT, the VT-ness of it, lots of different things would look dated. But again, you sort of put yourself in the position of the people there. A lot of the things that we take for granted are would be utterly alien. And yet, and that means the technology they were making it with was, less than probably we have in our homes. But that said, now Tom's got much bigger, longer boot things going on here. He's got different. I'd never noticed that before. He's got very different boots on location to those he has in the studio. He's got boots going up to his. I was going to say ganglion. The top of his thigh. But the modern technology we have. I mean, I'm doing this. I'm broadcasting using my telephone. Essentially, I mean, I've got a decent mic and stuff like that. But the idea that you could put stuff out there without somebody at the BBC liking you or whatever. Now I like this bit because again, Fenner showing that he's not a completely unpleasant character, and he's using his reasoning. They're not being, because they've done a lot of sitting around. Unfortunately, Neil McCarthy do have problems. Yeah, he doesn't quite get. I don't think he gets that line quite. Does he? I thought he fluffed it, but he didn't seem like he fluffed it there. But he doesn't quite get the line. Give the line the meat that it needs there, really, considering it's piggybacking on Maddox saying the Swampies have got some problems. But I really like Fenner going, look, I don't really like the Swampies, but he's not wild about the idea of them all being eaten by a giant squid. He's got a fantastic face, Neil McCarthy. He had acromalchi, is it? I mean, an archaic term is giantism, isn't it? But apparently, Casey Manning told me he was among the funniest people that she ever worked with. And a real sort of gentle, and it's a cliche, I hope it's not a pejorative term now, a sort of gentle giant. But and of course he's in Zulu, which is one of my favourite films. He's one of the Welsh guys, and he's one of the ones that gets to go on location, because not all the actors in Zulu are actually out there on location. Lots of them that stay in the hut. I love this. Never got to go to South Africa, but I'll do a podcast on Zulu. So that's the end of Glyn Owen. The plot had kind of run out of what to do with Glyn Owen, but it's the Doctor being very cold, which Tom Baker can be, which always surprises me, and I'm not sure I like. But that was the Doctor that I grew up with. But none of that really registered with me. It was only when I rewatched when I was older. I mean, I watched Full Circle. I remember Full Circle, but I don't remember him being quite so dismissive of Varsh's death as he actually is in the episode. And that sort of, that thing with Rome Dutt of, well, I told him not to move. I love the ground getting sucked underneath. I don't even know how they did that. I think that's terrific. Finally, this episode has started to sort of pick up a bit, and I think it's the end, isn't it? So basically, we haven't seen Kroll for the whole episode, even though he woke up last week. So I think critics of this story, might use episode 3 as an example of, well, everything does grind to a halt a little bit. But I think that's terrific. Now, I think the version that we have now, that's Philip Bird. He's brilliant in the Sapphire and Steel with the photographs as the faceless guy. And he's had a wonderful career. I've seen him do Shakespeare, still working. And I sort of know Philip a little because I did him for Who's Round, because it was very hard to get people for Pair of Kroll. So I got one of the extras, but he's an extra who's had an amazing career. But Philip should really have had a credited part in Doctor Who by now. But this is very, very early in his career. And it was because he was sort of local, I think. But then he did such a good job, they sort of take him to the studio. He's a lovely man, Neil, but Philip. But he's had a superb career, still going strong. But uncredited in this because he is an extra. Poor old John Leeson's right at the bottom of the credits, even though, but it just goes to show, good parts in those days that, it's worth turning up whoever you are. I mean, I think Frank Jarvis may have been slightly annoyed because he doesn't get to do an awful lot and spends the whole thing green. But I think that shot, the shot of Kroll, I think, is probably because I think BritBox has been given some fairly decent prints, and I think there was some work done for the DVD to to maybe reduce the harshness of the line between the Horizon and Kroll, which is a big fault with that whole shot. and it was, it was the big. It's the big heart-rending compromise when you've got a great location. That lovely stuff of the Doctor and the boat and the water, and you've got the fantastic that model of Kroll is excellent. Nobody talks about how good that model of Kroll is. It's an absolutely fantastic model, and it's got water and it's got texture and it's got it's moist, it's organic looking, it's a decent size, it's got lovely detail, it doesn't look like a puppet, but it's all ruined by the fact that nobody can quite get over the fact that it's obviously the camera has sort of shut off the horizon, and there's that big sort of line where the grass cuts off, and Kroll in Ealing Studios is sort of transported in. But I think that the actual model of Kroll is magnificent. But that's already been chosen by Ian last week. Do you know what my favourite bit is? Do I have to be honest? Well, I'm not going to win this. And do you know what? Sometimes it's just all about... Yeah, do you know what my favourite bit is? It's a line. And it's the delivery of the line, and it's the existence of the line, which there's no way Ian is going to choose it. But it always tickles me, and it's partly because it's funny, but it's partly because it's funny and played very straight. So it's sort of, I could just be choosing another actor, but I try and resist that. I think it's Valak's line about, when they go through what the different death rituals are. She says, what's that one? And he says, they just stick you in a pit and throw rocks at you. I think he delivers it brilliantly. I think it's very, very funny. And I've always liked it as a little moment. And you know what? Sometimes small, beautiful things is what Doctor Who is all about. And in an episode where, as I said, I think I slightly struggled there, which is why you got My Life with John Abineri by Toby Hadoke. I like Fenner's reaction to the fact that Kroll's moving towards the swampies, but it's a fairly static episode, that and the big sequence of which is quite fun because Tom Baker's so good, and I like the bit where he tries to hypnotise Ranquin, especially the payoff of that. That's quite good. I could have chosen that bit. But especially as that sort of got out of with a kind of cheat of going, oh, okay, the Doctor can opera sing his way out of this. Actually, I even say that. I kind of like that. Saying it out loud, enunciating it, makes it sound rather fun. And Tom Baker is on very good form in this, I think. In a kind of Tom Baker swaggering around, rather confidently daring anybody to give him a directorial note. But I am. Do you know what? I don't care. I'm not going to win this one anyway. I'm going to choose Valak's line about the holy ritual where they throw rocks at you, and Carl Rigg's delivery of it, just because I like it. And I doubt there'll ever be anybody making notes and making an official history of happy times and places, and one day somebody reading what I chose for episode 3 of Power of Kroll going, did he really? I can't believe it. So I'm going to live in the moment and go, I like that bit. What has Ian chosen? Ian, by the way, on the video will come out much later than the audio, but I do video versions of these if you want to go on YouTube and have a look to see what absolute state I'm in. Because it's the end of the day and I'm just loafing about and brush my hair. Ian is wearing a shirt not unlike one my mum gave me when I was about 16, and I've still got, because they made things to last in those days. In fact, I've probably still got some clothes that were made at the time that the Power of Kroll was on, and I don't think any of my newer clothes that are made around the time I'm doing this will still be around in 40 years. But that is another comment on the fact that highfalutin new technology actually isn't all that, and so maybe I need to connect with my inner Swampy. Anyway, there was that guy called Swampy, wasn't there? Who was the eco warrior fella. I remember my friend Francis is an actor. We were doing a talk at the Royal Exchange after a show once, and we'd do a Midsummer Night's Dream, and Puck was dressed a bit like a sort of an eco warrior, and Swampy came up for some reason. And Francis said, "Oh, you hear that Swampy died?" We went, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah. He had a heart condition. They offered him a bypass. He wouldn't accept one." So it's a lovely joke. But I wonder if Swampy's name was influenced by the fact that the Swampies, anyway, you might not even know who I'm talking about. He was an eco warrior that was protesting against the extension of, I'm presuming, some sort of bypass. The details are lost to me because I remember things like which extras are in The Power of Kroll. Right, what's Ian chosen? I said more in the post-Power of credits of Power of Kroll, I think, that was of any value than I did through the whole of the episode. I don't know what that says about it or me. Right, Ian. I'm boring you to death with the 8th holy ritual of TDM. Ian has chosen something that's going to take him 59 seconds to say.
For episode 3, I'd have to go for the execution. I love Robert Holmes for the way he seems to come up with some pretty grim executions, considering this is a family show. It's up there with the death by steam in the Sunmakers. But yeah, having the Doctor and his friends on a rack where plants are drying out in the sun and stretching their spines till they snap, it's pretty brilliant. I remember being kind of thrilled in that way little boys are by death and pain. But yes, although it does seem to me that it's a very stupid execution not to have a guard on. But the Swampies are obviously too trusting in their gods, as we see.
Now, that, you see, there was me going, oh, there wasn't much to talk about that episode, and I couldn't see the wood for the Swampies, because it is an excellent execution. Thank you to him for pointing that out. And I think it's weird, because it's never really grabbed me, that scene, but partially, I suppose, because I know, oh, well, they're going to get out of it. But that's the case with all Doctor Who, isn't it? And it is actually an ingenious way of dispatch. And it's obviously well conceived and thought through. He obviously quite likes the detail of sort of torture, but it is also a bit like, I'm going to leave you with the slow-moving laser beam, and you will die soon, but I will not be here to witness it. Which, so in a way, Robert Holmes could be saying, yes, I know that, and I'm doing it as a joke. And then you go, but how far should the joke go before it's too jokey to then be believable jeopardy? But I do think it's an ingenious thing, and I didn't mention in episode 1 where Rome Dutt talks about the worm that sort of burrows into your ankles and eats its way out of your brain. He loves all of that sort of thing that, again, just gives a little bit of colour, a little bit of peril. I always like it in Doctor Who when the environment is perilous, because that's just a nod to the fact that you just don't turn up somewhere where it's a bit like this, but everyone's got different hats on. And I think especially in the 60s, jungle planets are deadly, for example, and all of that stuff. And I like all of that, the fact that the idea that just landing somewhere could get you killed, because we may have worms and blue tits, but they've got burrowing creatures and thorns that turn you into deadly plant things, and I love all of that. So I should have concentrated more on the stretching on the rack than I did on actors' CVs and my parts therein. But that's why this process is quite useful, because because of Ian's contribution, I have a newfound respect for something that's was hiding in plain sight. I've seen this episode loads of times. I know that bit, but actually being sort of having a sort of mental nudge about it, you go, no, that is good and that is fun. And that's why hopefully we revisit these things, and hopefully listening to me blathering on might remind you of something that you'd noticed but hadn't thought about last time you saw it, or whatever. But for whatever reason you're here, and I'm sure it's not to listen about how terrible my week's been, that has been part 3 of The Power of Kroll. I hope it wasn't too much of a stretch, and I'm going to see and speak to you in part 4, where wherever you reach for me, I'm going to do all that I can. I wish I knew another line from the Jennifer Rush song to have ended with. Bye. Well, thank you for listening to Happy Times and Places on the Power of Kroll, or Squid You Like, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Ian Winterton, who can be found on Twitter at Ian Winterton and online at ianwinterton.co.uk. I would like to thank him and the various patrons of this podcast, who include Gary Wales, Adam Westwood, Rich Wiggins, Michael Williams, Andrew Willis, Andrew Wilson, Stephen White, Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, not that one, Richard Straw, Nick Tedston, David, two Davids whose surnames have been withheld for, I think, their own street cred, Jenny and Box 99, Paul Carrington, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Crocker, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, and Paul Dunn. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to join their number and be a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where there are advance releases, there is bonus material, there are pictures of my dog, and there's a chance to interact as well. And the tiers start from as little, I notice they're called tiers, that's what you cry when you realise what you're in for. The tiers start at £3 per month and go up to infinity. But for the £3, you get most of the things that are available to patrons, and certainly access to any material that comes out. And the patrons are currently about 5 months ahead. So, when they're listening to the Power of Kroll podcast, we still have petrol, fish, there are still fish, and we're still just about clinging on to civilization. So just imagine you could have been listening to this when the street you live on wasn't being razed to the ground by the dystopian society that we're all going to end up in. Or currently you are now consigned to. So there's a cheerful thought. And what else do you want to do to get yourself through life in a dystopian society, apart from support a blathering independent artist, which I think is a very generous way of describing myself, a rent-a-gob, which is me, Toby Hadoke, at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, or kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, if you prefer not to be obligated to do something every month and just would occasionally like to do a bit of drive-by shekel chucking into my hat. So that's those are the ways that you can fund these podcasts. But if you cannot, what costs you nothing is to go to iTunes or wherever you get them and to leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. That really does help. It warms the cockles of this old man's heart. So I'd be grateful for that, and it costs you nothing but a bit of your time and perhaps some exercise of your typing fingers. I'm also a UK-based stand-up comedian. I've run a comedy club called Excess Malarkey every week for the past 25 years. It runs on a non-profit-making basis, not because it's an incompetent business model, but because we like to bring the best comedy to everybody, as affordably as possible. So we do that every Tuesday, with a very low door charge, and that is at 8 p.m. at the Bread Shed in Manchester. It's me and 4 or 5 comics from the comedy circuit. We also have an online version because we started doing that during the lockdown in place of the live shows, and people liked it, and it increased our reach. It means that we get comics from all over the world, and that's on the first Sunday of every month at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. That is free. We do encourage donations if you can give them, but again, you don't have to. And it's just good for us that we're reaching out and putting a smile on people's faces, at least sadly only now once a month online, just because, real life has crept in and before the streets are consumed in fire, I pick my way through the future debris in order to actually appear in person on stage. That's Excess Malarkey Comedy Club. It has a website, excessmalarkey. I don't know if it's com or co.uk, but it's one of those two, and it's on Twitter at Excess Malarkey as well. And it's an X and an S and the word malarkey. Check it out. I'm very, very proud of it, and it's good-natured and fun. I didn't mention Glyn Owen's just been eaten by a tentacle. I didn't. There's so much I should have said about Glyn Owen. I actually wrote his obit for The Guardian because I rang them up when he died, and it was in the early days of me doing obituaries, and got somebody at the end of the line who said, "Oh yeah, okay, do that." So I just duly sent it in a couple of days later. They rang up and said, "Why have you sent this?" And I said, "Because I spoke to a lady on Sunday, and I called on a Sunday, and I should have thought anyway." Because actually you can always get somebody on a Sunday now. It's Saturday, it's harder to get people. But anyway, let's not get into that. And they said, no, we commissioned one of somebody else. And I just went, oh, okay, then. I should have went, well, hang on, you did ask me to do it. So I spent 2 days writing something that I didn't get. And I think that computer went kaput now, so I don't even have a copy of it. Oh, and it'll be in my emails. Anyway, I could put that on my Patreon. No, that would be here's something that never got published about somebody who's been dead for 15 years. But he was a bit of a cult figure with me and my friend Adam Riches, who is now an extremely successful Edinburgh Award-winning comedian, TV and film actor. But I used to act in plays with him, and we used to giggle about old movies and stuff. And we watched an episode of The Professionals together that had Glyn Owen as this sort of this old mentor of Bodie and Doyle, who were the sort of hard men in The Professionals. They're the leads, and they were doing a sort of workout with him, and he was, with one flick of the wrist, karateing them into sandbags and things like that. Even though he was, there was clearly a glass of whiskey. He's the sort of actor, Glyn Owen, who will, whenever he's not in shot, will swig a glass of whiskey, and then when he is in shot, will swig a glass of whiskey to punctuate his acting. And he'd do this sort of judo that he was clearly not capable of, and go, "You're good lads, but I'm better," because he was this sort of grizzled old veteran. And there's a brilliant bit where he goes into his flat and he thinks, he can tell that somebody's been in. So, he dives behind the sofa in that sort of Professionals way and comes up from behind it, alert and ready, even though, he's wearing a cravat and a safari jacket and he's clearly, one step away from the decanter. It's a glorious thing, and he's a TV type, and I adore him. He once sang, I think, Old Man River on Wogan as well. Everyone gets out Paul Shane singing You've Lost That Loving Feeling, but I'm sure they had Glyn Owen singing Old Man River. Never, when an actor sang on Wogan, I think, was it a good idea. Anyway, the stories I could have told about Glyn Owen, but I didn't, because I was probably rabbiting on about something else. So instead, you have it for your pleasure if you are one of the few disciples of the post-credits blather, which is what this is, which is now finished. But if you could seek out the Glyn Owen episode of The Professionals, I think it is a thing of joy. He has a line where he goes, "Gonna get a paper," which I don't know why it makes me laugh. He's in the car with them and they stop off at a newsagent, so "gonna get a paper," and you can play a drinking game where you drink whiskey every time Glyn Owen drinks whiskey in anything. I just imagine him always drinking whiskey. Anyway, I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna get a paper, and I hope you like this, because you're good, but I'm better. God bless him. Well, there we go. Bye.